Christopher Stockman, here you are. Describe what you do now, like what you're doing, who you are, just for people who don't know, just briefly.
Yep, I am a game developer slash game designer. I've been making games for over 20 years now. Started out in Super Nintendo, Sega Genesis land at the ripe old age of 15. And now I am in the wonderful world of VR development. People probably best know of my work of the very first Saints Row, where I was the design director.
Right. And so, okay, you're a design director. Okay, that game came out, what, 2006?
2006, yeah.
Saints Row, which would be considered at the time a AAA franchise.
Absolutely.
Now, I don't know if it was considered a AAA franchise when you were making it, but the journey to becoming a game director in 2006 is probably a lot different than it is today in 2023, where game directors are, you know, in charge of massive projects.
Yeah.
And there's just a brutal competition to get to those few positions.
Yeah.
So how did you become a game director of a AAA franchise in 2006? Relatively, I would say, maybe early in your career. How did that happen?
Yeah, it was pretty early. I think by then I had been making games for, I guess, a little less than 8 years. And I interviewed for a lead design job at Volition. And it was between me and another person. And that other person had just way, I guess, more recognizable, bigger titles under his belt. He was, I guess, the lead designer on X-Wing vs. TIE Fighter, and he was a designer on TIE Fighter, and just, I guess, more critically acclaimed titles than what I had worked on. And so he ended up getting it. But they still hired me, and they hired me as a level designer for the Punisher project. So I came in, I started making levels for Punisher, and then they came to me and said, well, you know, we have this other project that we're working on. It was titled at the time Bling Bling, and it was the idea was like an MTV lens of gang culture in an open world setting. That's all they really knew from a very high level sort of elevator pitch. Is you know, what is gang culture like in the view of MTV cable channel? So they said, well, you know, they already have a lead designer for it. They call them design directors back then, and but we want you to head up the multiplayer side. It was such a big project that, in their view, that they really wanted a design director for the whole game, and then they wanted a separate sort of lead designer that focused on multiplayer. So they said, Chris, come up with a plan for multiplayer. So, you know, I was basically stuck in a room, and I did this whole PowerPoint presentation, and I remember pitching it to them, and they were like, nope, this is terrible. This isn't big enough. You need to be more ambitious. So I went back to the drawing board, and then I came back 2 weeks later, and it was this wild, ambitious pitch that was involved in, I wanted to focus on players being in the world, not in matchmaking screens. So there was no like traditional game lobby. It was when you went in multiplayer, you were in the city, and you were with everybody else, and you could basically pair off with people and then go do separate multiplayer modes. And then I also wanted this idea of clans, but call them gangs. So you could join up with gangs and basically, you know, customize your characters and earn money in all of the various modes that we had, and then spend that money on basically what you would call it virtual trophies, and outfit your character with different clothing and different jewelry and different tattoos. And so when you came across someone that was like fully decked out in the pimp suit, you knew he was a badass that had been playing for a long time versus someone that just came in with a regular t-shirt and jeans. And they loved it. The Volition management was like, oh my gosh, this is great. Let's do it. They went to the THQ president, and they got an additional, I think, $5 million added to the budget. No one really knew what the total budget was. I think at the time they were saying it was like 15 million or something. And so then, yeah, I started working with the multiplayer team, and it was just me and like 3 other people, all engineers, and we just cranked away on multiplayer to get something going. But the engine was still being worked on, so it was very, like, we couldn't play anything for months. So fast forward, I think it was like 4 months later, they came, nothing was happening in the single player part of the game. No one knew what we were making. The design director was this weed smoking hippie dude from San Francisco that just was all about like game design theory and had us do all of these like sessions of like, well, what is a game and what's the core loop and what's good core loop and what's bad, and that's all fine. But if you're not making any decisions, and we're in the middle of pre-production, you're not making any decisions, then the game as a whole is not really making any progress, and no one really knows what you're making. So Volition management came to me and said, you know what, we want you to swap roles with the design director. We want him to be in charge of multiplayer and you be in charge of the whole project. And I said, well, give me $20,000 more a year and I'll do it. And little did I know that I was getting paid peanuts already, so then I just got paid a little bit more peanuts. But it was a lot of money to me at the time, and they said, yeah, do it. And so I came in and I basically I reset everything and I said, this is what we're making. We got 1 month left to go in pre-production. We're going to take what's really good about GTA and borrow it, take what's really bad about GTA and improve upon it, and have a next gen title that launches for Xbox 360. That was sort of my sort of idea, and everybody loved it, and the whole team was on board, and we were off to the races. And that's how I got into that role. Was literally someone sucked and I replaced him.